The illusion of I, where does it come from? You feel that, don't you? That solid, single you right at the center of your world. The one listening to my voice right now. The one who woke up in your bed this morning. Who lugs around your memories, your hopes, and your fears. But what if I told you that this you is the most convincing story your brain has ever told itself? And that's not just some late-night dorm room philosophy. It's a genuine mystery that neuroscience is finally starting to piece together. We all have this gut feeling of being a continuous self, a pilot in the cockpit of our body. Yet when scientists go looking for that little pilot in the brain, they can't find one. There's no single spot, no self-module. Instead, they find a buzzing, interconnected network of brain regions that work together to generate the feeling of being you. Today, we're going looking for the source of this grand illusion. We're exploring the brain's wiring to find the storyteller inside your head, and we'll discover that a major source of this story, the origin of the I, is a fascinating and powerful brain system known as the default mode network. What we find might just change how you see your past, your future, and who you think you are in this very moment. Section 1. The brain's storyteller. So what exactly is this default mode network, or DMN? The easiest way to think of it is as your brain's screensaver. It's a team of brain regions that roars to life when you're not focused on the outside world. When your mind wanders on the way to work, when you daydream about vacation, when you lie in bed replaying a conversation, yep, that's your DMN. It's the brain's default setting when it's time to look inward. This network links up a few key areas, including the medial prefrontal cortex, which helps you think about yourself, and the posterior cingulate cortex, a main hub for blending your personal memories. Together, with places like the hippocampus helping out with memory, these regions act like your own personal biographer. They don't just passively store your life's events, they're constantly weaving them together into a coherent narrative. The story of you. Neuroscientists sometimes call this process selfing, the non-stop creation of an identity. The DMN is the master of what's called temporal bridging, connecting your past, present, and future selves into what feels like one unbroken timeline. It's why you feel like the same person who went to elementary school, even though almost every cell in your body has been replaced and your beliefs have probably changed dramatically. Think of your sense of self like a sandcastle. From a distance, it looks like a single, solid thing. But get up close and you see it's made of countless individual grains of sand. Memories, feelings, thoughts, and sensations. The DMN is the invisible force, like the tide, that's always shaping these grains into the structure you recognize as me. The self isn't a thing, it's a process. It's a script that's being rewritten every second, and your DMN is the tireless author. Section 2. The self as an unreliable narrator. Now, if our sense of self is a story, the DMN is a pretty unreliable narrator. Not because it's trying to trick you, but because its main goal isn't perfect, factual accuracy. Its goal is to create a useful story that helps you survive and navigate the social world. This means the story of I is always being edited. Some memories get the spotlight, others get cut, and events are stitched together to create a plot that makes sense, even if it's not 100% true. Neuroscience gives us a few fascinating clues that the self is a story we tell ourselves. First, think about what the DMN does when it's idle. The fact that your brain's default is to chew on the past and dream about the future suggests that building a self is a constant background process, like an operating system that's always running. Second, Look at what happens when the DMN quiets down. Studies on long-term meditators show that DMN activity drops significantly during their practice. This lines up perfectly with what they report. The internal chatter fades. They stop obsessing about themselves, and they feel more connected to the world instead of being lost in their own story. In fact, this quieting of the DMN is strikingly similar to what happens under the influence of psychedelics. On the flip side, we see what happens in mental health conditions like depression and anxiety, where the DMN is often hyperactive. The network gets stuck in a rut, endlessly replaying painful memories and worrying about the future. The story of I becomes a trap, a narrative of suffering that shows just how powerfully this network shapes our reality. And finally, perhaps the most dramatic evidence comes from psychedelics. Substances like psilocybin have been shown to drastically disrupt the DMN, causing its connections to temporarily fall apart. People in these states often report a profound feeling of ego dissolution, where the boundary between their personal self and the rest of the world just dissolves. For a little while, the storyteller goes silent, and the illusion of being a separate I completely disappears. Section 3. The good news of the grand illusion. Okay, hearing that yourself is an illusion can be a little unnerving. It might feel like you're losing something important. But what if it's not a loss at all? What if it's actually a liberation? This story of I is an incredibly useful tool. It lets us make plans, feel like a consistent person over time, and handle a social world where our identity really matters. So this illusion isn't a bug. It's a feature of our evolutionary design. The trap is when we forget it's a story. When we completely fuse with our own narrative, we become rigid. We get stuck thinking, this is just how I am. We define ourselves by old failures, past traumas, and limiting beliefs. The story becomes a cage. When the DMN's narrator gets stuck in a negative loop, as it so often does, we suffer. We feel trapped by the very I we believe ourselves to be. But understanding that the self is a construction, a dynamic process, not a fixed thing, is incredibly empowering. It means you aren't chained to the person you were yesterday. If the self is a story, you can become a better editor. You can learn to choose which parts of the story to highlight and which to let go of. You can change, because your identity isn't carved in stone. It's being sketched out in every single moment. This is the promise of practices like mindfulness meditation. By learning to watch your thoughts without getting swept away by them, you're learning on a neurological level how to turn down the volume on the DMN. You're stepping out of the movie for a moment and just watching the projector. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your life story. You're the awareness in which all of it happens. This doesn't mean the self goes away. The storyteller is always going to be there, but you no longer have to be a captive audience. You can appreciate the story for what it is, a useful, creative, and sometimes beautiful fiction, without mistaking it for who you really are. This opens the door to a more flexible sense of identity, one that isn't weighed down by the past and is open to the future. Exploring these ideas isn't just a mental game. It's a journey into the very nature of your mind. If you're fascinated by the weird, wonderful intersection of your brain and your reality, hit subscribe and join us for the next deep dive. Conclusion. So where does the illusion of I come from? A huge part of it emerges from the ceaseless, intricate dance of neurons in your default mode network. While it's not the only network involved, the DMN is the brain's master storyteller. It builds the narrator in your head, the character you feel like every day, out of memory, sensation, and imagination. But this illusion, no matter how convincing, isn't all of who you are. It's a process, not a permanent state. By understanding the science behind it, we learn something profound. We aren't as solid as we feel. We're more like a river than a statue, always flowing, always changing. And recognizing the storyteller within doesn't destroy the self. It expands it. It opens us up to the possibility that we are so much more than the limited story we've been telling ourselves. And that might just be the most liberating realization of all.